Jane Sager. I'm chairman of the Animal Control Appeal Board, and I'd like to open this meeting with roll call. Patrick Corlin.
Here.
Okay, there you go. Mr. Patrick Flock.
Here.
Thank you. Al Petrulis.
Here.
And Mr. Doug Dombrowski.
Present.
Okay, we've got all 5 people here. Thank you. We need to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Our board has already received those. I would entertain a motion to approve unless anyone has a correction or addition. Yes, Paul.
I think we'll just briefly.
I think we skipped approval of agenda item 2.
Oh, did I skip the? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm not watching. That's why you're here. You keep me on track.
Sure.
Thank you.
And I have a comment on that if none of the board members do, but I'll defer to the board members first.
All right. Any comments on the approval of agenda? If not, Paul, give us your statement.
Okay. So I just want to clarify for everybody here, including people who may have downloaded our agenda packet online. Let's see, pages 27, 30, and 32, right near the end of our agenda packet. They don't belong. So those were inadvertently put in there. So they have nothing to do with today's meeting. 27, 30, and 30 through 32. Pages 28 and 29. Our late comment that is referenced near the end of our agenda, item 6B. So that's the late comment that we received after our meeting last time we met. And finally, the pages after the minutes, there's 2 pages there, pages 8 and 9. And those of you may recall that our January meeting, Member Dombrowski presented a couple documents during the meeting. It was something that wasn't in our agenda packet, but I put those in there for reference, as well as it's possible that those items may be discussed tonight. So I just wanted to clarify that for everybody, that the agenda packet itself, but other than that, I have no comments regarding the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I would entertain a motion from the board to approve the agenda as printed.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Ms.
I second.
Thank you. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now we'll approve the minutes from the last meeting. Any comment or correction or anything from anyone on that? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as printed. If you want to go home, somebody's got to do that.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as printed.
Thank you, Mr. Corlin.
I second.
Thank you, Mr. Block. All those in favor, wave your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed, do the same. Okay, motion carried. Mr. Evans said he would read our procedure tonight.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. And if you allow me to, I'll share my screen so that anyone watching can also follow along here. There we go. The Animal Control Appeal Board, typo, is a group of 5 of your neighbors or peers appointed by City Council to pass judgment on requests for appeals, interpretations, and other matters that are brought before them. Procedure. The board will hear the items in the order that they appear on the agenda. When an item is called, the chair will verify that the petitioner is present. Then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. The petitioner will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the action requested. After the petitioner makes their presentation and answers any questions that the board may have, the chair will open the public hearing. Administration will present public comments to the board. At the conclusion of public comments, the chair will close public comment. Once the public comment is closed, No other public comment will be taken unless in response to a specific question by a member of the board. The board may allow the petitioner to address or rebut public comments. The board will then deliberate and make a motion to approve, deny, or postpone the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 3 votes are needed. The decision of the board is final.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. With that in place, we will go on to the case that we're hearing tonight, and I believe our petitioners are here. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
All right. Then, Mr. Evans, will you present the case for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And in the agenda, this is for property at 114 Lyons. The applicant is Robin Newsom. In order to keep 2 chickens, a waiver from the requirement that a property be at least 0.75 acres in area. The property is approximately 0.14 acres in area. The subject property is located at 114 Lyons. In this area of the neighborhood, the subject property is outlined in red. This neighborhood is north of 14 Mile and west of Stevenson Highway. And the subsequent slides will continue to zoom in closer to the subject property. This is the site plan that was submitted. This is a page right out of the Newsom's application. And it at the bottom here is Lyon Street. It shows the existing structures on the house, and they're proposing a 6-foot by 10-foot chicken coop in this area in the backyard. And also in your packet, they provided us an example of what they're proposing. And that's a picture provided also from their application showing the area where they're going to put the chicken coop in the backyard. And with that, I'll turn it over to the board for any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions from the board for Mr. Evans? If not, then I invite our petitioners to address the board.
Thank you very much for having us tonight. We've tried to answer the questions as thoroughly as possible. We're happy to explain anything that is unclear. I know Mr. Evans at first had a question about where the run would be. We wrote a little summary of why we are interested in raising chickens. We've done extensive research online, and we also have a couple friends that have their own chickens, backyard chickens, and we enjoyed their eggs. And so we would like to start enjoying our own eggs. We understand that it takes a few months once we get them until they're ready to produce their own eggs. We are considering these more of a pet than something that we would just keep for while they're having eggs. Chickens only lay eggs for so many years, and then the decision to be what to be done with them. We would like to assure you that they will not be, put to pasture, if you will, taken to slaughter. Once they're finished, we're considering these pets, not just, a source of fresh eggs for my husband and I. Anything else that you can think of?
No, not unless somebody has a question.
If that's all, thank you very much. And the board has any questions, please address them now.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The application for the waiver mentions 2 chickens, but yet the detailed explanation letter keeps referring to 3 chickens. So I guess I'm trying to understand, what are we talking about, 2 or 3 chickens?
And that is my mistake, sir. I apologize. And my husband brought that to my attention after I submitted the paper. We would like 3 chickens, understanding that our application officially lists 2. So if the board decided 2 was it, then we would, of course, go with the 2. Because that is, again, that's my error. Thank you for bringing that up. I meant to mention it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board for our petitioner? Thank you. We go to, is it Jackie for comments from the public? Is that correct?
Okay. I'll begin by stating that I did email the board the 2 emailed public comments that came in because they came in before today. And there is 2 voicemails that I will play. So I will do that now. Hold on. I have to turn the volume up.
Hi, I'm the 36 Lions in Troy, Michigan, and I am friends and neighbors with Robin Newsom at 114 Lions in Troy. And I think they
Can you turn it up anymore?
take wonderful care of their property and that they have their wonderful neighbors. So I absolutely agree that you need to have their children. I thank you very much. My name is April Thompson. Thank you.
I didn't hear it.
Did you not hear that?
No, we could
No,
not hear
we
it.
couldn't.
Just a few words.
Hold on.
It started out fine and then just got worse.
Okay, let me play the other one and see if that works because we tested this early and it worked fine.
This is Rosemary Jones at 211 Lions in Troy. I'm fine for the meeting of the annual control board to appeal the way
I can't hear this.
I can't hear it.
Nope.
good.
Okay.
Can you translate?
I'll translate. 1 second.
Hi, I'm the 36 Lions in Troy, Michigan.
She lives at 36 Lions. She has friends and neighbors with Robin Newsom at 114 Lions. I think they should be allowed to have their chickens. They take wonderful care of their property and their pets. And they're wonderful neighbors. And she absolutely agrees they should be allowed to have the chickens. I thank you very much. And my name is April Compton. 1 second, let me make sure it was Compton. Oh, Davis, April Compton Davis. So that's the first one. And here's the second one. Rosemary Domich at, hold on. At 211 Lions in Troy. She's calling regarding the Animal Appeal Board meeting. To say no to the waive of requirement regarding chickens. They should not be living in a close neighborhood as this, a close neighborhood environment as this is. Please record my message as not wanting this. Change the waiver, change it all. Thank you. That's it.
Yes, Paul.
And I would like to briefly
Summarize the written public comments that we received, and applicants, you should know that I just emailed those to you, Robin. I emailed those to you just now. But normally in a meeting, we're able to, at minimum, at least summarize any written comments that we may have received from the applicants. It could be as simple as this: certain individuals have commented and they oppose or not opposed. So if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, if I could just briefly summarize the two written comments that we received.
Yes, that would be helpful for all of us. Thank you.
Great. Okay, the first one was from Mary Kohler. This is an email. And I'm sorry, it says from Mary Kohler, but it's signed Mary Lewitzky at 127 Redwood. And she advises that there is a discrepancy in the application between 2 and 3 chickens. And she indicates that the number of chickens, the answer to that should be settled. She requests that only female chickens should be allowed. And she would prefer only 2. So those are her comments. And then Howard and Jacqueline Milkowski of 128 Lions provided a introductory email and 5 pages of written comments, but I'll summarize, and they indicate that we object and oppose to this waiver, and they have documented their objections with the 5-page attachment that they've provided, and they would like that this be denied. So that closes the written public hearing, Madam Chair.
Thank you. If there's no others, we will close the public comment portion of the meeting. And I guess at this point, we go to discussion with the board. Jump right in.
I'll start out the discussion. Last month, excuse me, I came out in favor of loosening the ordinance somewhat and clarifying it. I've had chickens nearly, almost my whole life, except for the past several years, and I know what it's like to own them. I know what it's like to manage them. And even how I kind of size things up and how, I pitch it here and what I provided to you, Paul, it just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit in with what I know, my experience, speaking with others, my research, and what I see the other cities in Michigan do. 0.14 isn't enough room for them to forage. You also have quite a packed backyard as well, from a putting green, the garage, and other things as well. I think that it's a situation that it would be extremely difficult to manage these birds in that environment and keep the neighborhood peace.
Thank you for your comment. Anybody else?
Okay.
Yes,
Madam
Patrick.
I'll be voting no on this one because I just feel that the lot is just not accommodating for chickens. Beside the fact that it's very crowded, I just feel that 0.14 is not even nearly enough. And we have to consider that we do have neighbors opposing. And but the 0.14 is based on the ordinance. And so since we don't have even near enough acreage, I would be voting no on this one.
Any comments from our other 2 board members?
I agree. I think 0.14 is just really a limited amount of space for chickens, any kind of thing like that. So I'll be opposing too.
Anything else?
And I agree as well. I really don't see any compelling reason for us to waive the size of the lot is just it's just not conducive, I think, for having chickens in that tight of an environment.
Any other comments? If not, I would entertain a motion. And we make sure we formate it in the right way. I can remember how we do that.
We've got the resolution.
Template, Madam Chair, on page of the agenda packet. I believe it should be the first page. Yes, page 1 is our resolution template.
And since I looked at several things, I've got it out of order. The rest of the board probably has it in position. We would need a motion with a statement as to why you're making the motion to approve or deny. I need a motion from the board.
I'll make a motion. I seem to be good at that by this time. I'll make a motion to deny. I'll make it on point number 4, the second half, likely to be detrimental to the neighborhood. I think from my perspective and from what I've heard from my colleagues, we're pretty united in that it likely will be that a couple of birds like this would be detrimental to the neighborhood and likely cause issues with neighbors, especially considering that a couple have come out already opposing.
I have a motion on the floor for denial of this petition. Do I have a second? I can't second it.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
could I ask a question?
Of course.
Could we add to that motion and make it based on lot size as well? Inadequate lot size of acreage?
Mr. Dombrowski, are you willing to include that in your original motion as part of the reason for
Absolutely.
denial?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a clarification on top of what I said. Good comment there, Patrick.
I will
It is
second. I will
all because
second
of
it.
lot size.
We have a motion on the table for denial of this request, and I have a second. Any further questions or comments? If not, all those in favor of denying this request, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion has carried. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our petitioners for your time and your patience with us. I'm not real good at this computer stuff and
Thank you all very
technology.
much for hearing us.
And I'm very happy that we have a good crew with the city that can keep me straight. So thank you very much. You're welcome to leave or watch the rest of the meeting as you prefer.
Thank you very much.
The next order on business, under other business, I'm not sure where we're going with this. Who gets to talk first on that? Mr. Evans, would you
Yeah.
please help me?
I will, and if it's okay with the board, I'd like to just do a brief introduction. The subject matter is a carryover from our discussion in January regarding the city code, our animals code, chapter 90, and whether or not the board as a whole would like to make any modifications to that. At our last meeting, we had some discussion, and it was generally agreed that Member Dombrowski, who offered to would provide some additional information to the board for their consideration. And so he has provided that, and that is some of the pages of your what we call late submittals. You received a separate email with that. And also Board Member Petroulis has provided some comments as well. So with that being said, I'll just say that ultimately we can have this discussion, and whether or not we close the discussion tonight or continue it on for our next meeting, I think our ultimate goal for the board would be is that if a change is desired, the goal of the board is to try to come up with something to clearly enumerate to city council, perhaps the details of that change, so council can get an idea of what this board as a whole is thinking, and then decide what they want to do with it. And Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, I'll defer to the city attorney just to see if she has anything to add.
May I ask a question first?
Certainly.
Is this whole discussion and so forth stemming from the council asking us to review for them these questions about that particular city code?
Oh,
That's
I'm not
my
under the
question.
impression that council has asked us. No, I've received nothing from council that they wanted us to look into it.
Okay.
There is some members of council who are interested in this specific issue and have asked if we would be able to get the Animal Control Appeal Board's insight on it. So although it wasn't formally brought up at a city council meeting by the entire council body, there are specific members of council who have received comments from residents. And as a result of that, they wanted to, I guess, have this board discuss and think about whether or not how the ordinance works, if it works well, whether or not there's any tweaks or modifications or anything like that.
Thank you. Because in years past and so forth, we generally didn't get into any of these types of discussions unless the council sent us word that it's time to look at and possibly tweak the code. So I was just clearing up in my mind. Thank you. Who are we going to now, Mr. Evans?
Well, at this point,
My suggestion, if it's suitable for the chair, and if the board as a whole doesn't have any preference, perhaps would be appropriate to turn it over to maybe Mr. Dombrowski, and I'm just going in the order that we received items at City Hall. Mr. Dombrowski, it was agreed that the board would ask him to come back with some more information, which he did. And shortly thereafter, I think the same day or a couple days later, we received things from Mr. Petroulas. So maybe that's one way to at least get things started. If it's okay with the chair and the board, I'll turn it back over to you guys to see how you.
That's fine with me. Is that all right with the rest of the board? If no objection, Mr. Dombrowski, would you go ahead with the things you wanted to tell us?
Sure. I'd like to kind of take this in chunks for what I was thinking. The first one would be, from what I see, the animal ordinance insufficiently regulates the clarification, the manner in which any animals would be managed isn't quite clear. And that kind of shines on even why we come together here. As I look through the previous cases and participated last time and this time, it's even more apparent to me. What I mean is that, and I touched on this last time, that in a person who wants a deviation from the ordinance reads the ordinance, and the verbiage in the ordinance gives the person the impression that if they show a compelling reason, and that compelling reason I don't think is quite described more than just if you really want one, petition the board, and why the board may side with you. Okay, I feel that it gives that impression, and perhaps this meeting right here now, is some evidence of that. So what I try to do in the first part here is I try to change it, and I'm looking at a different screen here because I don't want to jump back and forth. But this one here is one in a write-up that's called Proposed Revision to City of Troy Animal Ordinance. And it's probably in your packet somewhere. But this here would be in section D under 90-80-80, procedure for appeals. I think that the procedure for appeals needs to be clarified in a way that I have seen it for zoning ordinances. And I pretty much copy this one out of a zoning ordinance. And what it does is it explains to the potential applicant for an appeal that you're going to be judged on, your particular circumstance of why that's special and why granting this deviation doesn't confer special privileges upon you that the rest of our citizens don't have. So, I mean, there has to be something in my view that weeds out a lot of these here that, 95% of them seem to fall into the same bucket, that they can be weeded out early. And if they're not going to weed out themselves, I propose that the members outside of the meeting have a preliminary vote on what we want to hear, like the Supreme Court has. The Supreme Court decides on what cases they want to hear. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we get the write-up first, look over the contents, and then decide and have a vote if we get together like this? Or do we get together for every person who has a sliver of an acre and wants 10 birds? I don't think that we want to put ourselves into that position, and I think that the interest in chickens particularly is growing. So we're going to find ourselves meeting on a pretty consistent basis here, hearing the same type of cases that we need to give better communication to the people ahead of time on what an appeal is all about, why one would be granted. That's number one. Yeah, Nicole?
Yeah, if I could, I think logistically there might be an issue with that. We have to give the residents that they have a due process right to a hearing in front of a board of residents in the city. So they have to have some kind of avenue to appeal Mr. Evans. And so I'm slightly concerned about whether we would actually be able to not allow them some recourse. We might, if we're getting flooded with applications, we might just have to increase the meetings. But logistically, I don't know that we're allowed to not hear an appeal, have a board hear an appeal.
Can we find that out conclusively? That's important to me. And I think the other board members as well. This routine can get pretty cumbersome if we're not getting cases that are, I think, worthy of several people getting together and making a judgment call on things that, that I've sized up need to be met in order for appeal to be granted. And these things that I'm talking about are things, like I said, zoning boards follow. And we don't have that in ours. Ours says basically here, says what the process is, and that's it. I mean, it gives hope to people. And then they start reading, well, let me get into the second point, about 3/4 of an acre, and they wonder where 3/4 come from, and then they see the part about livestock, and then they start thinking, well, geez, this ordinance has some other issues too. Why, geez, if it has the other issues, well, then they're probably handing out appeals. I don't know. I'll put my appeal in and see what happens. So the other part of the ordinance, and I think Al's touches on this too. I mean, specifically about the livestock stuff, it's got to go. It doesn't belong on 3/4 of an acre. It doesn't belong in Troy. I don't think that it's even here anymore. And I think just getting rid of that is going to give a better impression to the public that the ordinance is up to date. That's part two. Part three would be if we do keep stuff, I'm a proponent of suburban chickens here to a degree. I mean, if I'm not a proponent of it, then I'm going to put myself in the middle, and I'm going to judge it. I'm going to try to judge it unbiasedly. And I do that by thinking, okay, everybody's entitled to his or her own preference of a pet, so long as it doesn't unduly inconvenience that person's neighbors. You know, we all have to get along. We all have to live together. I see us in our group here, you know, for appeals, we send notices out to the neighbors of applicants, and then we get these negative responses back. You know, I seriously wonder if we sent notices out to people with dogs. Hey, how do you like your neighbor's dog? They're going to come back negative too, because it's only the person really who owns the pet that really has a fondness for it. To the others around it, they don't much care about it. Most people, I think, are inconvenienced by it. So I'm not kind of shocked that a lot of people say, well, I don't want any birds here. They're noisy. And I think a lot of the things that we hear about the birds, you know, they bring disease, they're noisy, this, that, and the other. You know what? Any animal, any pet, if you don't take care of it and clean up after it, is going to be the same way. So when I try to put myself in the middle and judge these things, I have kind of a hard time nixing that part of it. That's kind of where I wanted to have some discussion when the time's right. But I think I've had your ear long enough. That's what I wanted to say, and want to know what kind of your input is and what the team thinks it can be done.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. Mr. Corlin, was it you that had proposed or added? You're the right person that put in some information as well. Was I read right?
No, it was me, Jane.
Okay.
I put in some information.
Okay.
And
It was
I guess, yeah. It's fascinating because, Doug, do you have ESP or something? Because you've totally read my mind. Everything you said is exactly what I would say. Everything. So it's fascinating. So I'm struggling with this as well. I've been on this board for many years, and over the last, I don't know, 5-8 years, this whole chicken question has really bubbled up. In fact, the first so many years, chickens never were up. We were always talking about pigeons and other things, but chickens have become very popular, and that's obviously the trend, and we can't deny that. The issue that I'm having is that I'm struggling with is the very same issue that Doug brought up, is that you know, in the city of Troy right now, when you read the appeal process, it absolutely gives everybody hope that you can have chickens regardless of your property, and that's, I think, is a big error. So my approach to this was thinking that the vast majority of properties in Troy don't satisfy this 3/4 acre to begin with. Now that we could argue that size forever, where that came from and what it really means, and but in my mind, I'm thinking if we continue this, we're probably at a 99% denial rate. We're continually denying, and it's only because it's the way our ordinance or our code's written. And so I took that maybe a step further, and I said, well, in theory, we're denying every waiver anyways, so why do we even have this discussion at all? Just eliminate and essentially say, in the city of Troy, we do not allow chickens, livestock, blah, 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 blah. Don't even give them hope. And so that was where my mind was coming. How do we solve this problem? You know, if in the city, it's very rare that we would grant a waiver, then why are we even giving that possibility? I mean, to be honest, I don't even know if there is an actual situation other than this 3/4 acre. I don't know if there's ever a situation that we would give a grant to a waiver. You know, I guess maybe if you start talking, well, maybe instead of 3/4, half an acre, there are probably lots that'll start falling into that category. But today, I just don't see an instance where there would be an actual compelling reason to grant a waiver for not just size, but just the way our neighborhoods are structured and so on. So my approach to this was very simply, and maybe too simply, is just let's just eliminate that altogether. I mean, it's nothing unique. Obviously I listed out some cities and our neighbors have ordinances that do not allow chickens very clearly. So we wouldn't be an oddball city in any regard, but people who do want to have chickens, and that of course will not go over very well. So I don't know. So that was kind of where my thought was. So I kind of went a little maybe to the extreme. I don't know. To add to this discussion, and what could the solution be? I mean, obviously one solution is let's just not have chickens at all. Let's make it nice and clear. So that was my approach.
Thank you, Al. Any other comments from anybody? Yes,
Jane?
Pat.
Yes, on Al's situation that he mentioned in the notes, he also said that when the current permits for chickens come due, they will simply expire. And I believe that was your words, correct, Al?
Yeah. Okay. So yes. So what I tried to do is try to kind of put some thoughts into some wording that would go into the ordinance, because obviously we have to deal with people that do have chickens, and people. If there are people on 3/4 of an acre in Troy that have chickens, I have no clue if that's even true. I don't recall. I think maybe, well, we wouldn't have had given a waiver. So I really don't even know if there is anybody like that. But yes, so my thinking was we have to address the concerns that current chicken owners that have either been given waivers for whatever reason, and or are on 3/4 or greater property size. So we have to address that. So that was just I didn't want to ignore that, because I knew that's something that we would have to address. And so what I put together was a very rough thought of what it may look like. And of course, I expected there would be a lot of discussion from the board to get to some final verbiage that would be appropriate and that everybody would agree to. So those thoughts those are just thoughts, and it was really rough. But it was a point that I wanted to bring up, that we absolutely need to address, that there are people with chickens and being waivers too, I suppose. I mean, I know maybe one or two, I can't even remember, but there aren't many, that we should address, of course.
Thank you. Anybody else with a comment? If not, I will throw my 2 bits in. Since I've been around longer than, oh my goodness, any of you. Mm-hmm. In 40 odd years that I've been on the board and so forth, it's always felt odd that we had to address an appeal when obviously the applicant wasn't going to meet near any of the criteria. And as our legal city attorney pointed out, by law, we have to allow citizens in our city a way to at least have their say. We have to have some way for them to appeal a decision they don't like. That's required. The other thing that's always bothered me is that the way the ordinance was written, you had to have at least 3/4 of an acre to have any type of livestock. And over the years, since it's not been terribly specific, people have looked at that and said, I have 3/4 of an acre, I can have anything I want. And then it's like, yeah, well, I want a goat and I want a sheep and blah, blah, blah. And the ordinance, the permit problem, the process is set up. You have to have at least 3/4 of an acre, but there's other requirements you have to meet. So it's always frustrating to me to have people say, well, I've got 3/4 of an acre, so I should be allowed to have 2 horses or whatever. And that's not really the way it was set up. There's other criteria they have to meet. And if you have 3/4 of an acre, I'm sorry, common sense says you can't have 6 horses on it. So that part of the code, in my view, was always a little bit limiting because it seemed to, as Mr. Dombrowski said, oh, I can meet that criteria and I have free reign. And it gives people hope that, well, why can't I? And then Mr. Evans is left with somebody, I've got 3/4 of an acre, and he has to tell him, no, you can't have 5 horses. So that's a personal point for me. The 3/4 of an acre was put in because there had to be some minimum before people could just move to this new city and think they can have anything they want. We had subdivisions with people bringing in goats and sheep and all kinds of stuff, so they had to put in a minimum amount just as a common sense thing so we wouldn't run into a problem with too many farm animals in a subdivision. Personally, I could see us refining it so that it's a little more clear that just because you have the right acreage doesn't mean that that's the only criteria you have to have. So there's my 2 cents worth for whatever it's worth.
Can I say something?
Yes.
You know, you all know how I feel from the last discussion, the last meeting we have. I just think this is a Pandora's box if we start limiting or directing smaller acreages to accommodate the chickens of today that people, I guess, are going the direction of. I like the direction Al was going with this. We have to, and we have to agree that, yeah, it's got to be tightened up. We cannot have people that have that 3/4 acre and say, well, gee, I could have livestock. This isn't, we're not Ferndale, we're not Berkeley, we're not these towns. We're not going to be these towns. And you got to look at property value. You know, that's dollars and cents to people's minds. And anything you bring into a yard, yeah, if you had 8 dogs in a yard and somebody else had 5 dogs, yeah, I'd kind of worry about buying something if it's, you know, these are red flags that come up. So, yeah, we got to tighten it up. I agree, and I like the direction that Al's going. And if we can make it clearer and more decisive, I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Any other thoughts? What would we want to do at this point to discuss more? Yeah, Pat, go ahead.
My thoughts are, and this is a good conversation to have as a group, because my thoughts are possibly in the near future, if not at this meeting, to eliminate chickens totally from the menu, as far as no chickens will be kept in Troy. When this ordinance was established, probably, 50, 60 years ago, before subdivisions even went in. I mean,
there weren't many subs back then.
No, it was farmland, it was acreage, it was open land, swamps, wetlands. So when you have the subdivisions that went in, Beech Forest, the Woodlands, Oak River East, Oak River West, you know, your subdivisions along Coolidge, Somerset North, how would you feel if you had a $700,000 home in Beech Forest and neighbors on both sides of you had chickens, and you saw chicken coops from the view of your backyard with no fencing, since they don't allow fencing? I know I would be very uncomfortable. That's why this ordinance does need to be tightened up, and it does need to possibly look at eliminating chickens altogether. We are not a farming community. Maybe we were a farming community 50 years ago. That's possible. I wasn't here, so I don't know. But we're not a farming community now, and it just doesn't make sense. So I do agree with the direction that we're talking. And I do agree that it needs some discussion and somebody needs to put something together to make a proposal to take to city council.
I second that. Well, and it is. It's just that I'm glad we are talking about this because there's just too many open ends type things that's going on that we have to address, which we really shouldn't have to if we tighten things up and everything. And I agree, we're not a farmland. My family grew up here. My dad was born and raised in Troy, so we've been here for 90 years, and there were farms, and like Patrick says, it was farmland. We're not there. That's, I think, what Troy's been trying to get away from, is not being a farm town and being a city and being kind of, with it. So again, I just think that what we're discussing should be tightened up and finalized somehow and given to the board to say, hey, this is our feelings. This is what we think. So again, thank you.
I personally have an aversion to picking one particular type of livestock and saying we can't have that and not addressing everything else. So in my opinion, if we're going to recommend to this council anything, it should be a little bit more broader than just one specific type of poultry, rather than all poultry, or one specific type of grazing animal, or, not just pigs. We get pigs still occasionally, but it needs to be a little bit broader and a little more concise as far as Al has suggested. We need to tighten it all up, and is this type of stuff allowed or not for the good of the community? My other 2 cents.
It's tough for me. And then I see your point, guys. I mean, depends on what you like. I mean, if you don't like dogs and cats, you're looking for something else, something unique. And I think it's kind of hard for some people to understand that aren't familiar with the birds and are familiar with dogs and cats, that some people just don't want a dog and cat. And the point of, property value, you're looking out of your $700,000 house. Would you rather see a chicken in your neighbor's yard or a pit bull? That's what I always come back to. I got 2 neighbors with pit bulls. I really rather they have chickens. I tell you that. And if that's a deciding factor on what we do, then it starts to grow. It starts to grow because that thought is applicable to more serious things than just a chicken.
Where do we go from here? Any guidance from my city people?
May I make a couple suggestions?
Sure.
Let's look at where we all have consensus. I think we all have consensus on the appeals process. And Nicole, you mentioned going back and looking at this part. I want to be clear what I'm thinking is that, yes, the people of Troy need to have an avenue of appealing, but we shouldn't assume what that avenue is, meaning a meeting like this. We know now that the meeting doesn't have to be in person. Maybe that would have been an assumption a year and a half ago. So, I mean, if there's an avenue for appeal, okay, let's streamline that so that we're not rejecting 99% of them. I think we can get kind of consensus that we need to deal with that. The second thing is that, we might differ on the poultry part of this, but I think we're all on board with the livestock part. So, we can kind of just table those couple of things to say, hey, as a board, we kind of have agreement on a few things that we can, perhaps move forward on. And this looser end of what to do about the birds or whatever else may come up are the things that are going to require some, I guess, extra thought. But just talking with everybody here today, I mean, it helps us kind of align us on what we want to do And I think we do have, like I said, a couple of points here where we overlap, all of us. So I'm happy from that perspective to see that, there's some improvement, that we're all on board, that we can see an improvement, and that we do need to do something so that we're not having applicants like, well, we've seen.
All right. Anybody have more comments, more thoughts, or anybody with a suggestion of what would be the next step?
But Jane, so if I could,
Sure, go ahead.
Just had another thought, kind of building on what Doug was just saying, is if the appeals process can't be changed, where they need the due process or whatnot, then the other solution lies with the code itself, right? If we're trying to prevent people coming, we can't do a pre-screen and all that, so then it comes down to how the code is written. So again, maybe the way it's written, so people will immediately realize, 99% of the people will realize there's no way I'm going to get a waiver. So that I don't know how that verbiage would work, but I think that's where it comes down to. Now, the simplest method is like where my head was originally, is just make it very simple. Chickens or all livestock, poultry, whatnot, is not allowed. Very simple. And maybe too black and white, but it's extremely clear and understood by all. Now, if we're willing to do some sort of exception for some people under some circumstance, which I don't know what that would be, that we would allow chickens, how would that be written, or how would that be applied? I don't know if that's even feasible, and whether the board would ever even agree to something like that. So I don't know. To be honest, I don't know if there is a compromise when it comes to allowing chickens in the city of Troy.
Well, if you open up that door, that back door, that's where the appeals comes in. That's where everybody everybody goes, oh, well, there's that open door. Well, okay, then we got to shut that door somehow and just say, listen, because the stories that I've heard since I've been on the board is the chickens were given at school and the kids ended up with the chickens, bringing them home, and they've been raising them. And it seems like that seems to be the norm. Not all, but it seems to be the situations. And I just think we've got to close this door somehow, so there's no ifs, ands, and buts. I like you said, it should be black and white. The other cities that you mentioned, that you listed, were black and white. They basically said no. Well, I don't think you're going to hurt too many feelings if you just say, let's be black and white about it. No, this is it. No. And if you do have them, we'll waiver them until whatever. But yeah, it's got to be detailed somehow, but I don't think we should leave any kind of a door open that somebody says, well, there's a possibility. Well, okay. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents.
I guess I throw this to the board. And Doug, you've expressed, your experience with chickens and things of that sort. But would the board, under what circumstance would the board approve or allow chickens in the city of Troy? Under what circumstance? Why would the city be allowed to have a chicken in their residence, in their property?
Why? It would be a business. It would be like a cider mill, or it would be something like that. Or somebody would say it's a therapeutic pet. It would be something far-stretched. I want to make a couple points, though, that people's feelings will be hurt tremendously. Now think about living in Troy, what you like about it, all right? Now let's say that was taken away. Let's say that there's 0.5% of the people out there who really want these chickens, and if they can't have them, why am I paying my tax money to Troy? I mean, what makes Troy so great? And if we're restricting, we owe it to people to answer why. And the answer to why isn't because we can't manage it as a board. It's got to be some other logic that, stands on its own, not just that we don't want to keep hearing these sorts of cases. So those two things, I mean, I hear what you guys are saying, but I get hung up because to some people, these birds mean a lot. And if we can't understand it, then we've just got to think what means a lot to us in this city. And if it was plucked away, wouldn't we be willing to move? Even if it was something so simple. Yeah. And I guess that's it.
Well, I guess, again, kind of to, my thinking on that taking the chickens away, the nice thing for our situation, I guess, is that we aren't actually taking chickens away. People do not have chickens today. We're kind of, it's not like, there's a third of the population of Troy that have chickens today, and then we're deciding that we're going to no longer allow them to have those chickens. I don't know what the statistics are as far as chickens in the city of Troy. So I think one advantage we have in if we do decide to say no chickens is that we're not like immediately pulling chickens away from people. We are denying them the opportunity, but we're not actually being punitive and actually taking their chickens away.
Yeah. You are, I think, assuming that not many people in Troy have chickens. And that may be a good assumption. I mean, what's not many? I see some around, and I see that in, 0 to 5 years, those people are going to be irate when they find out they need to get rid of their birds, and they're going to ask the question, why? Or their friends are going to want birds, and they can't have them now this year. The last year they could have. Why? They're going to ask.
Well, I got a question. Did these people come to Troy thinking I'm going to move to Troy because I can raise chickens? Or did they just move here knowing, there's some stipulations, not like Ferndale and Berkeley and the other cities that you've listed that are so lenient about it. Did they all of a sudden say, gee, I think Troy's that much lenient? I don't think so. I think you're overestimating the amount. If they do have chickens and we don't know about it, because we pretty much have an idea of what's going on. And if we didn't, I'm sure a neighbor would complain. But you're saying, I mean, this makes this conversation about you're hurting people's feelings. Listen, as Patrick said, I'm getting into the business part of it, okay? I'm getting in dollars and cents. Does Ferndale and Berkeley have $1 million houses? Do they have $700,000 houses? Now, I don't mean to be, but we do in this area. And it means a lot for somebody to invest that kind of money and to have neighbors on both sides maybe having chickens. I just don't, again, we're at 0.75. If we eliminated it, I don't think that the majority of the citizens would blink an eye. That's all I'm saying. I don't think your ratio of the amount of people having chickens in Troy is as much as you think it is. Unless, like I said, unless they're doing it and we don't know about it, that could be a possibility. But we've been pretty much following 0.75 or more. As long as I've been here, 0.75 or more, you have the opportunity, but anything under, no way. Well, we're kind of moving towards, 0.69. I guess there's not too many complaints around the area, so I guess we'll grant that, but we won't grant the 0.71, that there were a lot of complaints. I mean, that's an open-ended door right there. How consistent can we be? I mean, we're at 0.75. Hey, that's fine with me until we tied it. And then there's no chickens. I'm cool with that. I'm sure a lot of other residents would be too. But again, we're not a farm community, and we're not Ferndale and Berkeley. So our property.
Yeah, you keep saying that. You keep saying that. I don't know what purpose it has, or in the hurt feelings remark. But
well, let's just forget the hurt feelings part.
What hurt do you have? Do you have a dog? You got a cat?
No, I don't have a dog or cat.
Do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything.
That makes it then tough for the point that imagine yourself now without it, or that you're set on it, or your kids want it, and nobody's giving you a good reason except that they personally don't like it.
Wait a minute. Does that?
I mean, I know you don't like it.
Wait a minute.
I know you don't like it, but you're not really hearing my points either.
Does that make me a bad person because I don't have pets?
You're putting that in my mouth now, like you put some other things in my mouth.
Insinuating because I don't have
didn't say
pets
that you're a bad person. I didn't say that hurt feelings. I'm stating my beliefs and some facts are all.
Gentlemen, can we stop this for a moment, please?
Absolutely.
At one point, Nicole raised her hand. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was only, I know the panel has been talking, this committee has been talking about how many chickens are in Troy. I know that, if people have more than 3/4 of an acre, they have to apply for a license, which is done with the zoning department. So if the board is interested in getting that information, I think we would be, maybe not this evening, but we would be able to pull how many current licenses we have and get that data for this board. If this board was interested in that, I was just trying to assist. I don't know if it's really relevant or helpful or not, but if it is, and it's a big deal to this board, then I think the city administration would be able to compile that data.
I think that would be nice just to at least have it on the table so we can at least see, I don't want to spout out figures. I don't know the figures. So if we can have some, hey, that could paint the picture a little better for us all, I think.
Absolutely. It might settle the case.
In addition, could we also receive data of how many waivers that have been granted for chickens less than 3/4? I mean, in theory, that would tell us exactly what the legal population is. So anything over 3/4, and then whatever waivers have been granted in the past. And I know there's been at least a couple that I can recall. So I know there's a few out there.
Well, wouldn't it, I think, to get all waivers that have been granted for the last few years, as many, and just really kind of do a data Excel like sheet on that, on kind of like, who there might be. Does anybody remember the lowest that's ever been granted? I can't.
No.
I haven't been here long, so I don't know. But are they that much off about 0.75?
I looked all this stuff up. I kind of know this stuff. There was a case a few years ago where it was a school situation where the birds came home. It's probably the same one we're talking about. The board let that woman and her kids keep those chickens for 3 more months until the end of the year when the kids went off to school. And she had a low amount of acreage, somewhere around like a half or less. Including her, as far back as the records go that are online here that are posted, and I think it's about 10 years, maybe 11 now, we granted our 4th waiver last session. So 3 before that. And of those 3, the one I mentioned, and then the 2 others were 0.72 acres, and I think the other was 0.73. They were almost there, not quite. Yeah. And those were the ones that were granted.
I'm okay. If it's close to $0.75, I wouldn't, 0.73 I mean, trust me, if it's in that, whatever.
And I believe for those particular things, they were close to the required amount. Plus there was adjacent property that was not property that was inhabited.
Oh, I see.
These were properties that backed up to a park or whatever, and were not surrounded completely by other neighbors.
Gotcha. I got it. Thank you.
Those type of situations where the the animals in question would not be nearly as close, as well as the fact that they had just a smidgen less.
Gotcha. I understand. Thank you very much.
And to put things into perspective a little bit, of those cases I mentioned, there were like a total of 23 cases before the 6 last time, from which those 3 were taken. So I calculated like a 91% denial rate.
So, and it's only been the
It is what
last
it is.
several years that it's been so heavily with chickens. We went through a stage where it was mostly pigs. And we went through a stage where one guy wanted snakes and a horse. And I mean, we can go back far enough that we had a family move from another country and they had pigeons in the garage and ducks that were grandpa's pets, and they were butchering and eating them, which upset a lot of the neighborhood. So the whole thing cycles around. We're in the midst of chickens now, and from my perspective, eventually, whatever the next fad will be, it used to be potbelly pigs, now it's chickens. Who knows what the next fad will be? But as we move along, we need to be more, I really worry about being picky and picking a particular type of thing, like a pig or a chicken or whatever. The ordinance needs to cover a little more generally so it's applicable to more people. So there's my opinion. Yes, Pat?
One thing that I thought of as you mentioned this is, what about if we put a weight limit? Like anything under 50 pounds is not allowed. It's one way of controlling it with a weight limit. But I don't know what the weight of a potbelly pig is. I think it's actually 60 pounds.
Well,
if I
the
remember
problem
right.
was people thought they were adorable, and they were as piglets, but then they grew to be 200 pounds.
Yeah, they start rooting in the whole yard. And
Right, you know,
stuffing everything up,
it's
and,
like
yeah.
everybody thought pot-bellied pigs were the most wonderful thing in the world, and it drove us all crazy. And they wanted these adorable little pets to live in the house with them, and as they get down the road, you've got a 150-pound pig or larger that's taking up an awful lot of space in your house.
But the other thing I don't want to hinder is somebody that maybe in Troy that has a horse, and maybe they have 0.90 acres and they have a horse and a horse barn. I don't want to see them get rid of their horse. And I did know of one family that had a horse over near Waddles in Rochester, but they had a little over an acre of land. I don't know if they're still there or not, but they used to take their horse up and down the rural street, which the neighbors loved it. Sure. And they were they cleaned up after the horse, and they were very responsible people. But they would, if somebody has, I don't want to see something like that get eliminated from the ordinance.
Well, and Patrick, that's why I took a shot at coming up with ideas of how to grandfather those kinds of things in, so that we're all sensitive to that. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly what I'm thinking is, there could be some grandfathering provisions in whatever we come up with.
Sounds like a good idea to me, too.
It does.
All right. We're at whatever time it is.
8:15.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I just want to get clarified. Did we ask Nicole to do some data search for us? I know we all started talking, and is it understood that there will be some data gathered as far as the previous waivers versus the current 3/4 and up? And will we get some kind of data? Did we?
Yeah, if I may answer.
Yes.
So if that's a critical if that's critical information for this board in order to make a recommendation to council, then we would be able to pull that. Mr. Evans and I would work on compiling that and having it as part of the next agenda. So if this board thinks that it would be beneficial to have that data to further the conversations, then we would absolutely be able to compile that. If it's not, and this board is already able to make some recommendations and is ready to put this behind it and doesn't really have too much more to add, then, you know, that's the prerogative of this board as well. Whatever direction that you guys would like to go, you know, we don't have to have an answer this evening. If there's some more data that's necessary, or if people want to mull it over a little more in the interim, then we can bring it back up at the next meeting. So that's really up to whatever you all would like to do and whatever there's a consensus for.
A hand raise for those people that would like this data and information so that we can discuss further at the next meeting. Anybody wants to do that, hand up. I see all 5 hands. That's very nice. Thank you, gentlemen. Yes, Paul.
And so just to be clear, we want to go back 5 or if we can, maybe 10
years for information on waivers, right? Is that one of the things? And is the other thing, did I hear animal permits and types that have been issued?
Well, specifically chickens. I mean, if it's easily sorted, I mean, I think that's what I would like, is to know how many chickens, not, you know, whatever else we've given in the past.
One more thing. I think that we need to know, are there any horses, cows, goats kind of thing left in the city too?
Yes.
I
agree.
think that general information will be helpful.
Good idea.
So I anticipate what we can do, and
I'm just talking out loud here because I haven't endeavored this yet, but I think we have the ability for at least the last 10 years to show, run a report that would tell us where the property's at with the address, the date the permit was issued. If it expired, it would have that in. We could do that. And then in all the permits that we issue, I type in a description. So it might be something like 5 horses or, well, no, it wouldn't be 5 horses, would it?
No.
But anyways, it would
2
be
goats
that.
or something.
And usually what I've done as well is if there was a waiver granted by the board, I'd put a note in there indicating that. So we could probably create a spreadsheet for about the past 10 years that would give that detail of information. I don't have the ability to say sort by chicken or sort by number of animals, but I'm guessing it's going to be under 50. So hopefully that's not an overwhelming number to give at least everyone on the board a sense of what direction things have gone in the last 10 years. And the other thing I can provide is we can go through the records, I believe, for the last 9 to 11 years, a little further back than what's online, Member Dombrowski. And this would be a little more manual, but we could talk about how many, what waivers have been granted and what it was for. We could probably put together a report like that. That's a little more intensive, and then I just couldn't hit a button on a report, but I'm sure we could do that. So
Does that sound agreeable to everybody?
Yes.
Okay,
At this
great.
point, if we're going to wait for some data, we don't need to make a motion about recommending anything to the city council because we haven't come to a consensus. Do we need to just put this on the agenda for the next regularly scheduled meeting? Is that how it's done?
Yeah, that would work. I think that
Is that
gives
all
us-
right with everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yes.
Yes.
Sounds wonderful. What else do I need to do to make sure I've done all the things I'm supposed to do?
Well, at this point, if it's satisfactory for the board, it looks like the discussion on this matter is probably concluded to this point. And
Do we need a motion to table this discussion till the next meeting?
well,
Why
we
not?
haven't really had a resolution, and I
Okay.
think it's pretty clear to everyone in the room what our next step is. I think we've done a good job of coming to a consensus.
Yes.
So, I'm seeing nods. I think everybody's clear on what we're going to do, and
Unless, can I, I'm sorry, if I could just throw something out, just so that, I'm kind of worried that we're just going to keep putting this off. Not that we're going to, but there's always that possibility. Should we make some kind of motion that this board intends to provide or to make a change? I mean, at this, I don't think any of us would disagree that we need to make a change. But should we go on record that at this point we recognize we need to make a change, and we're now going to take action in the future to make the change, just so that it kind of ties us into actually doing some action. I'm a little concerned that we'll just keep putting off these discussions to the next quarter, then to the next quarter. So just trying to figure out how to get us a little more committed to action.
So at this point, the board, our only action would be to make recommendation. We can't make a change. We would be making a resolution to provide information to city council is what we're a consensus, because city council is the only one that can change code.
Okay, no, excuse me for my naiveness then.
That's all right.
Who actually crafts the wording and the actual change?
That, if I may, Madam Chair.
Of course, go ahead.
So with the direction from City Council, the City Attorney's Office, working, obviously we would work with Mr. Evans in the zoning as well, but we would get our direction and our guidance from City Council on what they would like, and then we would legalize, put it in our legalese, and make the proposed amendments. And then once we did that, it would go again before council for approval, or for if we didn't quite get it right, then they could send it back with further thoughts or further revisions. So it's kind of the city attorney's office working closely with council to make sure that we're making the language exactly as council would like it to see it.
And if I could,
yes,
I know the planning department, one of our primary functions for many ordinances, mostly the zoning ordinance, we've got a lot of experience as well in crafting ordinances. So I'm confident that if the city attorney's office needed some input from anyone else at the city. So while it might be, initially come from the city attorney's office, we would do whatever's best as a city to make sure that we accomplished our goal. Who knows, that might even mean checking in with this board once we have a draft. I don't know. I guess a lot of that is kind of one of those bridges when we cross it, but I think the assistant city attorney's done a good job of giving an idea of what that bridge will look like when we get there.
Thank you.
So then, Madam Chair, if I can just
go ahead.
Summarize. I'm doing this in my head, and I'm doing it out loud as well. So our board here can make a recommendation to City Council.
Yes.
At that point, City Council can accept or deny our recommendation. And if they accept our recommendation, then they'll go down the process of working with the city attorney and so on, and with Paul, and
correct
out the actual verbiage. But our recommendation could end at City Council. It's just a recommendation, right? So
that is correct.
I just wanted to make sure that's how this works. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Nicole.
And to add to that, it would go as an informational. This board's recommendation would go in front of council, and then it would open it up again to public comment as council considers this board's recommendation. So at that point, again, too, if there was, any public comment that any residents, wanted to make about this board's recommendation or about the ordinance as a whole, that opportunity would be provided again. So I know we had it in our agenda this evening, and there wasn't, I didn't see at least any public comment or any recommendation from the public about what this board should discuss or contemplate. But that will be more so, I think, in front of City Council. I think it's a debatable topic where I think it may draw, I guess I would say controversial topic where it would draw in, I think, a decent amount of public comment for city council to also consider in addition to this board's recommendation.
Correct. Thank you, Nicole. Everybody got it clear in your mind what's going on and what we're saying we're doing. And so in slight summary, we will await the data to be provided for us at our next regularly scheduled meeting. We will again address this topic with the idea towards coming to some sort of consensus as a recommendation to pass on to council. Is that state fairly well what we're doing?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Anybody have any other business that not on this topic that they think we should talk about? If not, then I will thank you all and officially close the meeting. Did I do that right? Okay.
It sounds good.
It sounds good. You know, I'm